I spent 15 years building what I thought was a solid life with my wife, Amanda. We had two beautiful children and a comfortable home. I never expected that on the day we buried my father, as I stood grief-stricken by his casket, she would approach me with divorce papers and a cold smile. "Your family fortune is legally mine now," she announced loudly enough for nearby mourners to hear. My children refused to even look at me, declaring they were changing their last name to their soon-to-be stepdad's. There was clearly something happening that I didn't understand. Before I tell you how my entire family turned against me on the darkest day of my life, let me know where you are watching from and hit subscribe if you have ever had someone betray you when you needed them most. Growing up, I never thought my life would turn into the kind of story people share online. My childhood was simple but happy in a modest two-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Cleveland. My father, Martin, was a maintenance worker for a large apartment complex. He left early each morning, in his worn blue uniform, toolbox in hand, and often came home after dark. I remember asking him once why he worked so hard for so little. He looked at me with those steady eyes of his and said, "You never know the true value of what you are building, Jesse. Just make sure your foundation is solid." It would be decades before I understood what he really meant. College was a challenge. Unlike many of my classmates whose parents funded their education, I worked night shifts at a warehouse while studying engineering during the day. It was during my junior year that I met Amanda in a required economics class. She was beautiful, ambitious, and seemed impressed by my work ethic. Our early dates were simple out of necessity. Coffee shops where we would talk for hours, walks in the park, or discount movie nights. She never complained, telling me she admired my determination to build something from nothing. When I think back now, there were small signs even then. The way her eyes lingered a bit too long on luxury cars passing by. How her voice changed slightly when meeting classmates from wealthy families. After graduation, I secured an entry-level engineering position, while Amanda took a marketing job. We married in a small ceremony that my father helped pay for, though I insisted on covering most of the costs myself. 2 years later, Emma was born, followed by Tyler 2 years after that. I still remember the overwhelming love I felt holding each of them for the first time, promising to give them everything I never had. Over the next decade, my career advanced steadily. I moved up from junior engineer to project manager to department head. We upgraded from our starter apartment to a modest house in a good school district. We took annual vacations, usually road trips or package deals to resorts in Florida or Mexico. We were not rich by any means, but we were comfortable. At least I thought we were. Around our 10th anniversary, I began noticing subtle changes in Amanda. What started as occasional comments about friends, homes, or vacations grew into constant comparisons. "Look at the Smiths' new kitchen. Do you know how much Mark makes at his firm now? Why can't we afford a summer house like Jennifer's family?" It was around this time that Richard entered our lives. He owned the investment firm where one of Amanda's friends worked. Tall, polished, and dripping, with the kind of confidence that old money brings, he began appearing at neighborhood functions and school fundraisers. I noticed how Amanda would brighten when he entered a room, how she began suggesting we socialize more with his crowd. I tried addressing my concerns once after a dinner party at his sprawling lakefront home. Amanda dismissed them immediately. "Do not be ridiculous, Jesse. Richard is just a friend. Besides, it would be good for your career to network with successful people. Why are you always so content with mediocrity?" That word mediocrity began appearing in her vocabulary frequently when describing our life, our home, my ambitions. Meanwhile, the kids were entering their preteen years, becoming increasingly aware of material differences between our family and some of their classmates. Emma started asking for designer clothes. Tyler wanted the latest gaming systems and a phone that cost nearly $1,000. Then 6 months ago, my father called with news that shattered my world. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Terminal. 3 to 6 months, at most. Despite our tight budget, I immediately started taking time off work to drive him to appointments and help manage his care. Amanda showed surprising interest in his situation, though rarely accompanied me on these visits. 2 months before he passed, during a rare moment when we were alone in his hospital room, my father gripped my hand with unexpected strength. "Jesse, he said, his voice weaker than I had ever heard it. There is something I need to tell you. After I am gone, go to First National Bank downtown, box 247. Everything you need to know is there. When I pressed him for details, he simply shook his head. Just promise me you will wait until after I am gone. And Jesse, trust no one with this information. No one. In my grief and confusion, I honored his wishes without fully understanding them. Instead, I focused on making his final weeks comfortable, splitting my time between the hospital work and home where things were growing increasingly tense. Amanda seemed irritated by my absences, while Emma and Tyler became more distant, spending increased time on their phones or at friends' houses. Once I returned home unexpectedly from the hospital to find Amanda quickly ending a phone call, her face flushed with what seemed like excitement rather than guilt. "Who was that?" I asked casually. "Just discussing some investment opportunities," she replied. "Someone has to think about our financial future while you are busy playing nurse." The comment stung, but I was too exhausted to argue. My father died 3 weeks later, and the real nightmare began. The morning of my father's funeral dawned with appropriate gloom, heavy clouds threatening rain that never quite came. I stood before the mirror, adjusting my tie, rehearsing the eulogy I had written through tears the night before. Amanda entered our bedroom already dressed in a sleek black dress I had never seen before. Expensive-looking and far more stylish than funeral appropriate. "Do not embarrass me today," she said, checking her makeup in the mirror. "Important people will be there." I was too grief-stricken to process what she meant or why important people would be at my simple father's funeral. When we arrived at the small chapel, I was surprised to see far more attendees than expected. Colleagues from the apartment complex, yes, but also several well-dressed strangers in suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. More jarring was Amanda's behavior. Rather than sitting beside me in the front row, she guided Emma and Tyler to seats on the opposite side of the aisle next to Richard, who nodded solemnly at me, as if his presence at my father's funeral was completely normal. Throughout the service, Amanda leaned close to him, whispering occasionally, while my children sat stiffly, eyes never meeting mine when I glanced their way. When it came time for the eulogy, I approached the podium on unsteady legs. "My father was the hardest working man I ever knew," I began, voice cracking. "A man who taught me that character is built through consistent daily choices, not grand gestures." As I spoke about his dedication and integrity, I noticed several attendees nodding, knowingly exchanging glances I could not interpret. Amanda watched me with an expression I had never seen before, something like impatient anticipation. After the service, I stood near the chapel entrance, accepting condolences from people filing out. That's when Amanda approached Richard, hovering just behind her shoulder, my children trailing reluctantly in their wake. Several people slowed their exit, sensing something unfolding. "While everyone's here as witnesses, you should have these," Amanda said, thrusting a thick manila envelope toward me. Her timing was so deliberate it felt choreographed. My confusion turned to horror as I opened the envelope to find divorce papers. The details blurred before my eyes, but one section was highlighted: claims to all marital assets, properties, and any inheritances received during the marriage. "Your family fortune is legally mine now," she said, with a triumphant smirk that transformed her once beautiful face into something unrecognizable. "I knew your father was hiding something all these years, living like a janitor when he was sitting on millions, and now half of it is mine." I turned to my children, searching for any sign of the loving family I thought we had built. Emma, 14, and already mimicking her mother's cold expression. Tyler, 12, and standing awkwardly in an expensive suit that Richard had probably purchased. "Kids," I started, not even sure what I wanted to say. "Save it," Emma interrupted. "We are changing our last name to Richards. Mom says you lied to us our whole lives, making us live like we were poor when you were secretly rich." Tyler, always more sensitive, at least had the decency to look conflicted before delivering the final blow. "You're dead to us anyway." I became aware of several phones recording the scene. Amanda had orchestrated this public humiliation, perfectly ensuring witnesses to what she clearly expected would be an ugly confrontation. Instead, I carefully returned the papers to the envelope. "I will have my lawyer contact yours," I said quietly, my father's voice echoing in my head. "Trust no one." Then I nodded silently and walked away, leaving Amanda laughing with Richard, while my children stood uncomfortably beside them. I drove directly to my father's apartment, the only place I could think to find solace. The small one-bedroom unit was meticulously organized, much like the man himself. On his bedside table I found an envelope with my name written in his steady handwriting. Inside was a safety deposit box key and a note with 2 words, "Tomorrow morning." I spent that night on my father's couch, surrounded by the simple possessions of a man I thought I knew completely. The next morning I went directly to First National Bank, key in hand. Box 247 contained several folders of documents, a USB drive and a sealed letter. With shaking hands I opened the letter first. "Jesse, my son, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are likely confused by many things. Forgive an old man for his secrets. What you are about to discover may seem like betrayal, but please understand my reasons." The folders contained unimaginable revelations: financial statements, investment portfolios, real estate holdings, trust documents, all revealing that my simple maintenance worker father had secretly amassed a fortune of over $75 million through decades of strategic silent investments. The USB drive contained a video recording of my father clearly made during his final months. "I began as a maintenance man because I needed work." He explained on screen, his illness already evident in his gaunt face. "But I continued because I loved the simplicity and honesty of the work, even after my investment succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. I watched how money changed people around me, rarely for the better. I wanted you to grow up valuing work, building your own path. Perhaps that was selfish of me." He paused, coughing slightly, before continuing. "I also grew suspicious of your wife over the years. Her interest in my affairs increased recently, and I discovered she had been investigating my finances. I do not tell you this to hurt you, son, but to protect you. The trust I have established is ironclad, designed specifically to withstand divorce attempts. Harold Winters, my attorney, whose contact information you will find in these documents, will explain everything. I am sorry for the pain this may cause, but sometimes we must lose everything to see what truly matters." I sat in the small viewing room of the bank for hours, attempting to process this new reality. My father, the secret millionaire. My wife, the calculating gold digger. My children turned against me through careful manipulation. By evening, I had contacted Harold Winters and begun to understand just how thoroughly my father had anticipated the storm that was now breaking over my life. The elegant offices of Winters and Associates occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, offering views of the city that once would have intimidated me. Now, sitting across from Harold Winters, a sharp-eyed man in his 60s, who had apparently managed my father's legal affairs for decades, such superficial impressions seemed meaningless. "Your father was a remarkable man," Harold said, after explaining the basic structure of the trust. "People underestimated him his entire life, which he used to his advantage in business. He suspected something like this might happen." According to Harold, Amanda had hired a private investigator 6 months earlier, around the time of my father's diagnosis. The investigator had uncovered hints of my father's wealth, but not the complete picture or the legal protections in place. "We have evidence of her affair with Richard going back approximately 14 months, Harold continued, sliding a folder across his desk. "Text messages, hotel receipts, photographs. She has been planning this for some time, waiting for your father to pass before making her move." The contents of the folder confirmed what part of me already knew but had refused to acknowledge. Amanda and Richard entering hotel rooms. Intimate messages. Plans discussing my father's wealth and how to secure it once he was gone. "And my kids?" I asked, my voice hardly recognizable. Harold sighed. "Children are easily influenced, especially when material comforts are dangled before them. Richard has been quite generous according to our surveillance. Designer clothes, new phones, promises of private school." I left Harold's office with a clear strategy. I would not contest the divorce itself. I would not fight for the house or our modest joint savings. I would say nothing about the trust or the true extent of what my father had left behind. Instead, I would watch from a distance as Amanda's plan unfolded, believing she had won everything. I checked into an extended stay hotel and maintained complete silence despite Amanda's increasingly demanding messages about accessing my father's supposed fortune. Meanwhile, I monitored social media through accounts my children didn't know I had. The posts told the story better than any private investigator could. Amanda touring multi-million-dollar homes with Richard, Emma showing off new designer clothes, Tyler playing video games in what appeared to be Richard's media room. All of them celebrating their upgrade while my apparent downfall was still fresh. 3 days after the funeral, they made their move. Amanda used our joint savings as a down payment on a sprawling 6-bedroom mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. Social media exploded with their housewarming preparations, new furniture, catering arrangements, Emma bragging about her new bedroom with a walk-in closet bigger than our old living room. I finally broke my silence with a single text to Amanda. "I hope you find what you are looking for." Her reply came instantly. "Already have. Enjoy your sad little life alone." Throughout this time, Harold was executing the legal strategy my father had designed. The trust was structured brilliantly, appearing vulnerable to exactly the kind of claims Amanda was making while actually being completely protected. Martin had created an irrevocable spendthrift trust with specific conditions that made it impervious to divorce proceedings. More importantly, he had established a clear paper trail showing that his maintenance job was his primary income and that the investment wealth was completely separate from any inheritance I might receive. The timing had to be perfect. We waited until Amanda and Richard had committed fully to their new lavish lifestyle until the housewarming party they had planned to showcase their victory. 7 days after the funeral, as champagne flowed in their new mansion and guests admired the luxury they had supposedly secured, Harold personally delivered a sealed legal notice to the door. The timing was deliberate, ensuring maximum witnesses to what would follow. I watched from my car down the street as Harold, distinguished in his tailored suit, was reluctantly allowed entry. I imagined the scene inside Amanda, accepting the envelope with annoyance, perhaps opening it carelessly in front of her guests, expecting it to be some minor legal detail about the divorce. Instead, she would find detailed documentation of the trust's structure. The fortune she thought she could claim was held in a completely irrevocable trust with specific conditions. The money could only be accessed for education, health care, reasonable living expenses, and charitable giving. Any attempt to contest the trust would trigger clauses that would redirect all funds to various charities. There was no lump sum inheritance for her to claim, no fortune to be divided in divorce proceedings. The surveillance cameras Harold had discreetly installed captured the meltdown that followed. Amanda screaming at Richard, guests awkwardly departing, my children looking confused and frightened in the background. My phone rang 2 hours later. Emma. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but decided to answer. "How could you hide this from us?" She sobbed, her voice shrill with panic. "Mom says we might lose the house, that all the money is trapped in some trust thing, that you tricked everyone." I listened to her accusations, silently remembering her cold eyes at the funeral, her cruel words. "You chose your side, Emma," I finally replied calmly. "Now live with it." I ended the call and turned off my phone. The fallout continued over the following days. Richard, realizing there was no easy money to be had, quickly distanced himself from Amanda. The mortgage company initiated foreclosure on the mansion when the first full payment could not be made. Credit card companies began calling about the extravagant charges Amanda had racked up in anticipation of the windfall. Meanwhile, I moved into a modest apartment and began the process of rebuilding my life according to my father's true legacy, not of money but of integrity and patience. 6 months passed. Spring turned to summer, bringing new growth that mirrored my slow healing. I had established a quiet routine, continuing my engineering work remotely while volunteering weekends at a community center teaching math to underprivileged kids. The simple 2-bedroom apartment I rented felt more like home than our house ever had during the final years with Amanda. The divorce finalized with little fanfare. Amanda received what the law entitled her to half of our modest marital assets. The judge was unimpressed by her claims about hidden wealth, especially given the clear documentation Harold provided, showing my father's long-established trust predated both the marriage and his death. I heard through mutual friends that she had moved in with her sister in a neighboring state, her relationship with Richard having imploded spectacularly when the true financial situation became clear. The house was long gone. The designer clothes sold online at steep discounts, the lifestyle she had briefly grasped slipping through her fingers like sand. My first contact with my children came unexpectedly. Tyler called one rainy Tuesday evening, his voice small and uncertain. "Dad," he said when I answered, "can we maybe talk?" We met at a diner halfway between my apartment and his new school. He slid into the booth across from me, 13 now, and looking somehow both older and younger than when I had last seen him. The expensive clothes and arrogant posture were gone, replaced by a regular teenager in jeans and a hoodie, shoulders slightly hunched. "I am really sorry," were his first words. "I believed all these lies Mom and Richard told us. About you hiding money and stuff." I let him talk, watching his eyes occasionally fill with tears. He stubbornly blinked away. He explained how quickly things had changed after the trust revelation. Richard disappearing practically overnight, the humiliating move from the mansion, his mother's increasing bitterness and drinking. "She keeps saying it is all your fault," he admitted. But I found her secret phone, saw the messages between her and Richard from before Grandpa even got sick. They were planning everything. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "It is not your fault, Tyler. Adults make choices that kids should never have to understand." Emma proved more resistant to reconciliation. Her pride, so similar to her mother's, kept her distant for another month after Tyler and I began rebuilding our relationship. When she finally agreed to meet, her approach was more defensive. "So, do we get any of Grandpa's money or not?" were her first words as she slid into a coffee shop chair across from me. "The trust exists to support you, not spoil you," I explained patiently. "It will pay for your college education, cover medical expenses if needed, help you buy your first home if you demonstrate responsibility, but no, there are no luxury shopping sprees or sports cars." Her expression shifted several times as she processed this. "That is actually fair," she finally said, surprising me. "Everything got so crazy with Mom and Richard talking about mansions and private jets. It never felt real." Over the following months, both children began spending weekends with me. According to the trust guidelines, I established clear expectations. They would attend public school, have reasonable allowances tied to chores and academic performance, learn the value of work by taking part-time jobs when they reached 16. Emma, initially resistant, discovered she had a talent for photography and began saving for her own camera equipment. Tyler joined a community soccer team demonstrating leadership skills that made me immensely proud. Amanda made several attempts at reconciliation once her options dwindled. First with angry demands, then with tearful pleas, and finally with seductive suggestions that we could outsmart the trust together. I maintain the same response to each approach. We have nothing to discuss except the children's well-being. 1 year after my father's funeral, I was volunteering at a grief support group when I met Melissa. A widow with a teenage son, she had experienced her own version of family betrayal when her in-laws attempted to claim her husband's life insurance policy. Her quiet strength and genuine warmth drew me immediately. Our relationship developed slowly, built on honest conversations and shared values. When I eventually explained my full story, including my father's secret wealth and the trust, she simply nodded and said, "Your father sounds like a wise man who understood what truly matters." The children's relationship with Melissa evolved naturally as well, especially once they recognized how different she was from their mother. No manipulation, no materialism, just authentic interest in their lives and gentle guidance when appropriate. Today, as I reflect on the journey of the past 18 months, I understand what my father meant about foundations. The fortune he built was impressive, but the values he lived by were his true legacy. He protected me not just financially, but spiritually, ensuring that when everything superficial was stripped away, I would recognize what remained as the only thing that ever truly mattered: integrity, compassion, and the courage to walk away from toxic relationships even when they masquerade as family. Have you ever discovered that losing something you thought was essential actually freed you to find something more valuable? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button and like this video to help others who might be facing similar betrayals find their way forward. Consider sharing with someone who needs to be reminded that sometimes what looks like an ending is actually the beginning of something authentic and meaningful. Thank you for listening, and remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in the quality of our character and relationships.